Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Roundtable. I'm Hunter Leigh, and joining me as usual in San Francisco is Spellsy.
Hello.
And now in Sydney, Australia at the CBSI offices is Travis.
Hello, how's it going? I'm actually in the GameSpot streaming room, so people who are familiar with the stuff produced out of here, like House of Horrors or whatever, will be familiar with the area that I'm at.
House of Horrors, rest in peace. And they're doing the Extra Life, the Australia section of the Extra Life Marathon there later today, I'm assuming, for the people there, Travis?
I think it's tomorrow, actually. Well, I am, like, I can say this because by the time this comes out or whatever, maybe, I don't know. But the spoiler is that I'm going to be on the Extra Life stream tomorrow from Australia. But, yeah, that'll be in about 24 hours.
Is that a spoiler? Was that supposed to be a secret? Did we just
well, they've hyped it up. Zareen has hyped it up as this big secret or whatever, and apparently I'm in the trailer for this as a special guest on the Australia stream.
If you're in the trailer, is it then not already spoiled?
It says a special mystery guest.
A special mystery guest, and then it shows your picture?
No, it's like the Piglet thing, as we'll talk about, with like the shady dark figure or whatever.
All right, so let's not get ahead of ourselves then. So we'll jump in. So World's finally finished. 5 weeks of tremendous international action. A better series than at least I had predicted. Royal Club got maybe a pity game from Samsung White there. Travis, you were live in person. 45,000 fans. Hideous ponchos being handed out by Riot. Tell us all about it.
Well, I just want to say, first off, it's great to just be on vacation now. Be able to relax, not have to worry about anything breaking or anything interesting happening in the League of Legends scene. No, I've just World Finals was fantastic. Like, I've been to 3 now. This was by far the best. I thought that, I mean, we'll get into the games, I'm sure, in a second, but I thought that the Imagine Dragons thing, which I was very concerned would feel forced because they're like, these guys made a song, like, let's put them on stage. They executed that almost perfectly. I don't know. The whole thing felt amazing. I wish I could convey to you guys how big that stadium was. It was just crazy to walk in and realize it was going to get filled with people. And then, of course, once it did, crazy good. I don't know. It felt so neat. Even the pyrotechnic stuff they were able to do, shooting stuff out of the stadium, was just so awesome. So, really fantastic show. Again, we'll get into the games in a second, but just want to give a huge props to Riot for that because it was fantastic to watch, and hopefully a lot of that was able to come over onto the stream. In fact, I'm curious, you guys are kind of the first people I've talked to about the stream experience. What was it like? Could you feel how incredible it was?
I mean, it was kind of mixed. Like, there were some shots that were kind of like not really empty, especially the beginning part. It seemed like it was empty, but it was cool. I don't think we got the 40,000 people atmosphere that you're talking about.
But once the sun went down, it helped a lot. Because then the crowd, the people that shuffled in, I guess they were having some kind of technical difficulties on their end getting people in. So when the broadcast started, the stadium looked pretty empty. But when the sun went down, suddenly the crowd had all those light up whatever they were, and you could really get a better sense of the ambiance, and they seemed loud and really into it. So I think a soft start, but I'm glad it was great in person. Obviously, 45,000 people is a significant achievement, and this was really for the Korean and Chinese audience more than anybody watching on Twitch, for example, or something like that. So I'm glad it worked in person. Definitely a success. So into the games themselves, Samsung White, pretty dominant games 1 and 2, kind of a soft game 3, a fizz and singed pick that maybe didn't work, and then back to the plan in game 4. Spellsy, what was major takeaway for you on that series?
I mean, I think Samsung White just dominated as hard as we thought they would. They kind of look undefeatable. Like, I don't know. I guess they lost, but
you were never nervous for them.
Yeah, exactly. They stomped almost all of their games. They had great early, mid, and late game, or if they even got to late game. But I think they're talking about kind of relating back to Samsung or SKT's rise last year and how there's just one dominant team that's just so much better, and it's just crazy, I think, how it happened again this year. While Samsung White didn't win any OGN recently, they lost to Blue consistently, and then they came out and they crushed the tournament. It was crazy.
Yeah. Travis, dominance, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, dominance is about the only word that you can use to describe it. I did think that it was a more enjoyable setup than what happened last year at the finals, but Samsung White is just very clearly the best team in the world right now. And it's really interesting. I feel like there's a really good chance that, based on how unstable stuff seems to be in the Korean scene, that they could pull every year the World Finals is victor is pretty much like dead by the time the next finals come up. But so we'll have to see if they're able to like break the curse and hold it together.
Yeah, I was impressed. They seem to have Royal Club totally confused right from the beginning. Royal Club's pick ban strategy was really weird. They went in after seeing Blue lose, repeatedly picking a late game comp and losing in the semifinals. Royal Club came in and immediately picked a late game comp, like the rise sort of these scaling champions, and then got blowed out early in the game, and the game was over before their champions had a chance to scale.
Yeah.
And then in Game 3, they finally sort of found something that worked. They moved Rise to mid, and then Game 4 right back to what they were doing and out the window. It was strange.
The Jace also took them almost by surprise. I don't know, the first game they gave it to him, and then he just crushed with it again, and they tried to take it from him, and that totally didn't work. And then they just banned it.
Right.
Why didn't they ban it from the first? Did they not expect Jace to be such a huge pick?
It's a sleeper pick still somehow in the final. Yeah, and they had this situation where they were forced in all 4 games to ban Zillion and Alistar, which normally only purple side bans, but in their case they were banning on both sides. Seemed like they were losing every phase of the game possible. Travis, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that as well. I specifically, sort of going into Game 3, it's kind of interesting. One of the theories that I've heard talked about a lot, at least whenever I was over in Korea, was this idea that Game 3 was the game where Samsung White picked the champions that they wanted to have skins for,
right?
Which I think is kind of an interesting one. So, they're whenever it's kind of funny to talk about it because you're like, man, it just seems like Samsung White was like you said, undefeatable Spellsy, and then you're like, well, they did lose that game. But it's kind of hard to feel like that one counts in some ways. I don't know. I mean, I hate to do that thing where it's like, oh, it doesn't count, because when you win, a win is a win. But I think similar to what we saw with the TSM one, it's arguable that Samsung White was not really. I spoke to Kelsey Moser afterwards, and she's like, I kind of wish it was 3-0. And I was like, oh, why? And she's like, because Samsung White didn't respect Royal at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Singed pick was definitely questionable. Whether for the skins or not, I don't know. We really don't know how that process works exactly, but Game 3 was, you can forget about it, and I think looking back on this historically, we were not going to remember that it was a 3-1 and Royal Club surprised us, or whatever. Yeah. This was a dominant victory again. So moving on then, Travis, best part of Worlds, it's been 5 weeks just looking all the way back, traveling for all this time. What was the best part of Worlds?
I think the best part of Worlds was the fact that it really surpassed people's expectations in every possible way. At least it did mine. I thought that the games were, I remember us being like, okay, well, the first set of groups are not going to necessarily be that entertaining. And then, behold, the very last day, which people thought would be the least entertaining, was definitely the most. And then the second set of groups was incredible. I mean, seeing the Kaboom thing with Alliance and seeing, incredible as a not EU fan, I guess is the best way to put it with that caveat, right? But there's just so many different things. I mean, who will ever forget Taipei Chingchong? That was a yeah. I would vote Svenskeren is the player that had the most impact in the World Finals or World Championships this year.
Certainly in the group stages.
So I just think overall, this thing surpassed my expectations. Finals, the show surpassed it. I mean, the match, got the 4 games, right? Time and time again, it was just way cooler than what people expected. And I heard some of the Riot guys were kind of teasing Nikala, being like, okay, you can stop talking about IPL being the best tournament ever because we were able to do it. So
yeah, I think my favorite part was there's a lot of suspense throughout the entire World Finals. I mean, maybe the finals where there wasn't much suspense because everybody was predicting Samsung White, but I think every other match for the most part was oh, maybe Samsung White had an easy group. Maybe they're not going to crush TSM or whatever. Samsung White versus Samsung Blue, who knows how that's going to go. There's a lot of upsets or kind of up in the air matches that I thought provided actual nice tension.
Yeah, I think even Royal Club's run again this year was a surprise to a lot of people. Nobody picked them to go that far. You had this sort of charming team of underdogs who can't even talk to each other, and this sort of coming together. I think that's a nice storyline that we'll look back on. And this kind of 2-year run in a row of Royal Club and Uzi coming in second, I think is also something that's really remarkable, and they deserve like commendations for that. That's pretty tough. I think Riot, like you said, Travis, tremendous kudos for putting on such a complicated event over 5 weeks and keeping it all together and mostly building momentum over time, like not really losing momentum, no major hiccups, no major issues really that were under their control. Every event went off without a significant hitch.
Yeah, setting aside, I actually have a question for you guys. Setting aside the complications for us as journalists and professionals in covering this event, what did you think of the decision to have Worlds, or what did you think now, post Worlds, of their decision to move it around between these different countries and these different locations? Because in the press day the day before finals, which we haven't really had a chance to talk about either, they did mention that they plan to continue to do that, where they move World Championships around between different countries. I mean, no word if it'll be to the same extent or same scale, but I mean, what do we think about that now post finals?
I think I have mixed reactions. I think the cool thing about having it be on the same patch and the same patch we played on for like months brought like really interesting kind of progression throughout the tournament of like Jace had to rise and Syndra kind of was only in the early parts, and there's a lot of kind of strategic back and forth, I think, throughout the tournament. But I think the problems with the multi-region thing was like the beginning in Taipei wasn't that hype. I don't think so. Like, I don't think it was like the biggest event, like the biggest like kickoff. And then like the overall, like if you just showed up for the finals, if you were a fan who flew in or something, then that would be it's just kind of almost impossible to have that be a fulfilling experience unless the finals are going to be like the best finals ever.
Yeah, I think that's you're leaving a lot up to chance. I think Riot got lucky that the two Southeast Asian teams happened to be in the region that was being played in Taipei. And had that not happened, I think that weekend might have felt like it was missing something. Because you had local fans seeing none of their teams playing. I think there was something really nice about Korean teams winning in Korea, and like you got to hear TSM chants from time to time and other things from fans that you might not have expected, but this was like, the home crowd was getting to see something. I expect next year it'll be in China, and we'll have some of the same thing with Chinese teams doing well and getting the support, and we don't know, it's a long way away. We have no idea what that'll look like, whether they're moving around China or they move around Asia in general and then end up in China or whatever. So I don't know that it was necessary, but I do, to Spellsy's point, I like the length and pacing of the event. Moving may feed into that like you're only going to play every weekend and space it out because you have to move. But I think that the pacing of the event was really nice.
Yeah, very good. I had similar feelings. I mean, it was definitely a trek to cover for that long. And I mean, I'm sure that we'll talk about, like what we could have done to cover better, or how we approach next year if they decide to do this. But I actually quite enjoyed it. I think from a like storytelling experience, like one of the cool things was Caster Jun, who's the hype Korean man. It was really cool because you could tell. I mean, even with you could tell because he'd be yelling out the names, and right at the start of the show, like he'd go like Taipei, Singapore, like Busan. Like it was really cool to feel like whenever we got to Korea, like, okay, there's been this like path that has brought us here, and then like finally we're in Seoul for the semis, which is where all this is gonna finish in the finals next week. So I kind of liked it from a storytelling experience. I think that there's, as Spellsy mentioned, some problems that like maybe like having it in Korea would have helped bring like the hype for the early stages on a little bit more, but it's interesting. And I don't know, it's something I'm still digesting and thinking about.
Right. Downsides for me as a fan, and we don't need to linger on this, but I think the time zone issue and trying to watch at 1 a.m. repeatedly was just unpleasant. And Riot has to make choices. It has to be on at some time. It's going to be inconvenient. But as the region that was inconvenienced greatly this year, I think that sucked pretty tremendously and made it less fun. Either you get spoilers or you stay up or you're in some kind of nightmare. So I think that definitely didn't didn't work for me. But I do think it was interesting to watch what was really sort of a Korean performance or like presentation of League of Legends, which having watched the LCS a lot, you see kind of our take on it. OGN happens in the middle of the night again, it's a very thing. But this was an interesting mix of sort of the American culture of the broadcast combining with the sort of stagecraft and setup of the Korean teams. I thought that was really enjoyable all the way through.
Yeah, I think next year it'll be interesting to see if they try to expand and go even bigger. Like we've seen bigger and bigger each year. Or if they'll just I think they'll probably just keep this.
Yeah. And we haven't seen ratings yet, but I assume it was a real success in the Korean and Chinese markets, and that's something for Riot to be happy about. So let's probably move on from Worlds, unless you have some lasting impression you want to send out there, Travis.
Not too much. I don't know. I would just wrap it up by saying like huge success. Really loved it. Pretty happy now that like if it had been one more week, I would have just been like, but
yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. It was definitely one of the more unique experiences of my life, even just in general, traveling all over the place and seeing all these games and meeting all these people. So, if anybody ever has the chance or opportunity to follow a world circuit along, like you have some money after leaving a job or something, and it just lines up, I would highly recommend it because it was incredibly fascinating.
Fantastic. So the moment Worlds is over, roster news just explodes out of the gate. I think Riot made a mistake by having all the contracts end the day after Worlds because there's like no gap for anything. You just head straight into like roster disaster explosion land. But we've seen Piglet join Curse. We've seen Dignitas fall apart. Who knows what's happening there? We've seen Crepo and Snoopy announce they're leaving EG. We've seen all kinds of things. Let's start with Piglet joining Curse, Travis. This was, I believe I had that officially, but I think this is still, at the end of the day, is a pretty surprising move for Curse, an NA team, to go get a serious top-tier player. What kind of an impact do you expect Piglet to have on Curse looking ahead to next year?
It was interesting because while we posted the Curse made an offer to Piglet's story, and so many people immediately out the gate, like a lot of the community feedback and even people from within the industry were saying, "Oh, this is ridiculous." Some of the comments I remember on our article were like, "Wow, how dare Curse even offer Piglet this contract or this offer, because that's like offensive that he would ever play for them." So as time went on, and I was behind the scenes, I heard more and more that it was very likely. Unfortunately, never enough that I felt comfortable writing about it. But lo and behold, it happened. And because I kept hearing more and more about it, I started to talk a little bit about, in theory, what would this be like? I think Double said that he was the most challenging player that he's ever laned against whenever I asked him about it. I think in the same way that Vasily did a huge amount for the AD carry scene, or at least that's what some of the AD carries I've talked to feel, is that he did a good job of introducing a new style of play and being an interesting component and rival. I think Piglet will maybe even more impact the NA scene and really change. We've always historically had pretty good bot lanes, but this will be really fascinating to see what Piglet can bring to the scene. I think the other thing that I would say, though, is that while I'm excited for Piglet's entry into the scene, and I loved interviewing him at All Stars and feel like he's a really interesting personality that'll do well within the already very fascinating NA cast of characters, I think that, similar to when Edward was brought over and it's like, well, this is going to be it, like our bot lane, will go crazy. I think Curse will probably lower the Piglet skill more than Piglet will bring the Curse skill up.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I mean, Curse will have a really strong bot lane, I think, now with Xpecial, who's arguably one of the top tier supports, like maybe the top tier support in North America, and then Piglet. So it'll be interesting to see if this will be the step that they said will now finally bring them back up past fourth. I mean, who knows? They said that it was going to be with the Xpecial too, but didn't really work out.
You don't believe it? Is this
a
world's caliber team?
I think Travis is right, where when Piglet's going to move over, I think, like Edward, he will drop more than he will bring everybody up. Like,
you guys are haters.
It's hard to be like a international thing. We've seen it with all the EU junglers who are getting back, and then like people like Dexter and Crepo are saying like they want to go back to EU. They don't, like, maybe America wasn't as hyped as they expected.
Right.
Amazing was saying that too.
Right. So
I think we might see this again with Piglet. I mean, I don't know. I think that like grass is greener on the other side for most people.
He doesn't speak. This is the first time, by the way. Like I feel like a lot of people are ignoring this because people are like, oh yeah, you bring Koreans over, but Seraph spoke not very much, but admittedly enough English, and he certainly understood it. Like Helios, the same thing. Like this is the first time where like I saw Piglet in Korea. Dude does not speak or understand English. Like it's so. And I mean, I guess maybe they'll try to figure that out a little bit. And as we saw from Royal Club, you don't necessarily need to speak the same language in order to be an effective bot lane. But I don't know. Like, if he understood complete English, then yes, I think I would very much agree. But I think that I think a lot of the strength of these Korean players comes from being within the Korean ecosystem, being on these teams that have like these coaches that have all this experience. I think NA is getting there. It's not there yet. And so whenever I look at like he can't communicate effectively with the rest of the team. And also like he's going to leave his like, you know, home field advantage of being within this Korean ecosystem. I can't imagine the guy getting better.
All right. Well, let me make the case for Curse.
Yeah.
You came in 4th last season, and the teams above you, TSM lost their jungler and may have a really hard time getting a better jungler. Cloud9 staying together, so okay. And LMQ completely disintegrated, which we'll get to in a minute. Like, there's real opportunity for you to move up. And what did you do? You traded Cop for Piglet in the offseason. Yeah. That's got to be an upgrade. Overall, that still has to be an upgrade. If I'm Curse, I think I'm a top 3 team next year, at least right now.
Yeah. I think it's addition by subtraction. Every other team is blowing up, and they're the ones who are like, I guess Piglet for Cop isn't that bad.
Piglet for Cop's not that bad, right?
No doubt that Piglet is better than Cop. I just think that I don't necessarily mean to think that Curse is going to get worse. I just think like Piglet is not going to be. This will not be the same Piglet that we saw in Korea.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, well, let's start talking about the other teams. TSM. There's rumors that Santorin is he's gotten an offer, maybe, kind of. They've never scrimmed. There's no tryouts. Do you put how much stock do you put in that they would sort of make a blind offer to Santorin without trying him out at all in any formal way?
I don't know. I know Daily Dot published this article, and I haven't actually. I think it hit while I was like flying to Australia or something, so I didn't even have a chance to read it yet. But I don't want to say that I think that the article is wrong, but I also don't think that they were just like, yo, Santorin joined the team, right? Like, I know TSM has always historically done these tryouts, so it's hard to believe that there's just like a contract sitting on Santorin's email address or whatever, and he's just ready to sign it whenever. I don't know. I think that they're probably trying a lot of different things, and Santorin is probably one of the people that they're talking to, and they probably said, if we brought you on, like, how much would you be looking for? So I think that's a possibility, but I mean, there's so much up in the air for these teams, so.
I agree. I think it was just like a scoping out kind of deal where they were just like, are you really that happy on Coast? Or?
Yeah, but how crazy. You're the #1 team in NA. You just, advanced through the group stages for the first time. You're looking ahead to next year thinking we're going to be, we should be contending next year, advancing, doing even better. And you're going to make an offer to a player you haven't tried out at all, who's never played at an LCS level. That doesn't strike you as really, I mean, even if it's true, and I'm not saying it's not true, it seems questionable from a team management standpoint, much like they did with Glebe, to bring in a player that you actually don't know that much about, and you don't know whether he has particularly great synergy with the rest of the players on your team. That seems just risky. I don't know.
Yeah. Like you've said before, I think the top teams should want to pick up from lower star LCS teams, like people like ManCloud in the previous seasons where they've been the star of their team but not really on the top 3 team. But I don't think Santorin or
Probably
really
not
fits that role.
Yeah. All right, Travis, let's move on to LMQ. What happened there? I mean, you can give us the brief news version, but then, where do they go now?
Yeah, I broke the news yesterday about at least 3 of their players leaving, Zhao Zhao actually being the only one who's for sure staying, supposedly, and then more still in discussion. First off, feel so sad about this. People will remember I was the person who broke LMQ coming in, and I've done house tours with those guys, etc. I really, really enjoyed the effect that team had on the NA region, and feel as though they really showed that you can have a team come. I mean, I know some people are still oh, they are still an LPL team or something like that, but I felt like they really proved you can have a full team come over and be an effective part of a region. Though, again, still happy about the 2/3 rule. So it's unfortunate that that's happening, especially after they almost made it out of groups. Anyway, I don't know what that team does now. You're in such a terrible position because language again, right? Language time and time again is going to be this huge discussion. I think over the course, it has been for the past year and will be for the next year at least. And
you don't think
I just don't know what you do.
You don't think Royal Club's success should calm everybody down on the you have to speak the same language? Smart pings and basic English, we can all do that, right? Who cares?
Royal Club. First off, it's important to okay. Royal Club is a very good team. Let me preface this that way, right? Royal Club is probably not the second best team in the world. The format for Worlds doesn't show that, or isn't set up so that the team that gets
True.
number 2
absolutely
is the second best team in the world. I think that it was very random that they got to the place that they did. And if you look at, I mean, Spellsy could probably go into this a little bit further. I feel like we should maybe do an article that's just why Royal Club shouldn't have made it to the finals or something like that. I just showed the stats because I've been talking to a lot of different people, and I'm sure Spellsy knows these guys had a gold deficit. One of the interesting stats I heard, and I don't know, maybe Spellsy can confirm this, but was that Samsung White had 100,000 gold lead across all of Worlds.
Cumulatively?
And that what's that?
Cumulatively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that World Club had a negative 1,000 gold lead, or a 1,000 gold deficit by the time they got to finals or whatever. So my whole point is, I don't know if Royal Club should be an example of hey, you don't need to do this. I mean, even by the time you got to finals, you already had Zero saying he wanted to join an NA team. This is not a team that is a Cloud9 where they're really, there's a ton of camaraderie there and you feel this is a solid team. I think it's just
Maybe.
A team of people that are all really good and manage somehow against all odds to make it to the finals.
Okay, but who would you rather be at the end of the season, Royal Club or Cloud9? I think you'd take Royal Club, right? You just got runner-up at Worlds and way more money and everything. I'm not saying this is just get 5 people who don't even know each other and put them together, but at some point, individual skill and basic game knowledge and some level of coaching had seemed to be able to overcome communication barriers there.
I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot on this show, actually, where what makes Koreans so good is that they have team play or whatever, and that's what's really the catalyst, not their individual skill. And I think that, as Travis was saying, is kind of a miracle that Royal Club got as far as they did, and they got a lot of close series.
But they had a super clear identity, right? They had a play style that was straightforward. You're not protect the Uzi exactly, but they knew what they were doing in each game, and they put the team together with a specific purpose.
Do you remember the before Worlds where Insect was throwing a fit or whatever because he wanted to gank top instead of ganking bottom all the time? There's clearly they might not all agree on this identity really, or all buy into.
They all got on the same page eventually, and it seemed to work. All that goes to say I agree that LMQ's in a tough spot because you have 1, maybe 2 players who have really limited English, and they're forced, because of the rules, to go find 3, at least NA players, maybe bilingual NA players, but NA players who will have a questionable, knowledge of Chinese. who knows where they are? I mean, they could field any team of whatever at this point. It's like it's crazy.
With all of all these teams retiring, or all these players retiring, all these teams kind of dropping all these players, there's so much room for free talent, and so like, who is LMQ going to pick up? Well, there's already like Nintendo X and Glebe and
think about what you just said. They can't get Nintendo X and Glebe
because they're already taken.
Going below that. Travis, what happened? What?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hilarious. I mean, by the way, I actually have maybe I shouldn't tease this if I don't for sure have it, but I did have Vasily apparently reach out to me saying he wants to do an interview. So hopefully we'll have some more insight into what happened, because that was one thing I wasn't really able to learn, other than to know that I know Ackerman was just like done with America. He's like, I want to see my friends, I want to see my girlfriend, that kind of thing. So we'll have to find out what happened elsewhere, but at least with Vasily specifically. But I don't know. By the way, if there was ever a time where Reddit's obsession with Chaos was like justified, maybe this is the moment for Chaos to go.
I don't know. But I think this is the offseason where management is really going to show like who's good at this and who's not good at this, and that's becoming only more important over time. Like, we've left the era of like player coaches and like bro town and whatever, like just putting together your friends, or we're past that now, and managers really have to shine. And I think this speaks to Crepo's statement as he left EG, Travis, which I assume you've read by now, although it came out overnight. Well, I'll sum it up. So he was basically said he was really unhappy with the situation that EG ended up in, where management was great at shopping for groceries and keeping the house clean, but not good at actually managing the personalities and building a team. Mm-hmm. And that Yellow Pete and Snoopy left the team so late that they were still living in the house, and Alltech was sleeping in some Harry Potter-like bed at the bottom of the stairs or whatever, and this other guy, and that they didn't get along and they didn't talk to each other, and the young players didn't take it as seriously. He put them majorly, especially EG Guitar on blast on Facebook on his way out the door, really kind of burned the bridge behind him. It was a very negative tone to the article and targeted more than anything at management. And now, as your EG, you're rebuilding a roster, LMQ, you're rebuilding a roster, Dignitas, you're rebuilding a roster, CLG, you're rebuilding a roster. Like, managers are going to make or break their teams this offseason and going into next year in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. And I don't know, like the spotlight is so rarely on those guys. We don't even know who's good at that, like who you should put faith in for putting a team together.
And the thing is that in comparison to Dota, this happens at the end of every international, actually, where all the teams just blow up. But then it's based not on, there's no organizations really. People just form random teams. Like, there's like the secret team that just they call themselves a secret team. That's like a
WWF Survivor Series team.
They just have no sponsors, no real organizations. There's no LCS where they have spots and stuff. So it's actually really weird to see.
I could not agree with you more on that, Hunter. I hadn't even actually thought about it too much in the NA context, but people know or will remember if they watched the show a couple weeks ago where I felt as though a lot of the EU issues that we saw with them not making it out of groups was management needing to get more involved. I feel like EU organizations and the management and the involvement of staff is just not there in that region, and I think that NA is definitely going to be the place where you need to see effective management, effective coaches, analysts, like everybody coming together to be like, what does this team need to fill the gap? And so we'll have to see. I mean, LMQ's management, as everybody knows, is kind of in this was recently in this weird flux. I don't know how solid it is now. And, with this company just sort of starting, it'll be interesting to see, sort of rounding back to where we were talking about with LMQ, how effective that organization is at recovering from this essentially disaster for their team.
All right, so obviously a lot's going to play out. We're taping late on a week this week. We're going to tape early next week preferably, and we'll know a lot more. Alex Penn has joined us for a guest blog writing about all the rumors on the site, so you should check that out and follow all of the crazy action as things end up here on ongamers.com.